Homeless Bunny 10. I mixed up a Negroni cocktail and slid it over to Roman Torchwick. Pompous asshole made me want to feed him his own hat, but he did have a solid taste in drinks. And hats? Fortuna would approve. It was a pity the man wore more eyeliner than the hyper-competent precog ever did. Thanks, and you didn't even shed in oof. He was cut off from his bitching by Melanie's blade heel jabbing down on the arch of his foot, making his aura flash brightly. At the same time, Neo elbowed him in the side, bending him over. He wheezed, "Why?" Neapolitan and the twins had a somewhat unique relationship. Before I came along, the three barely tolerated each other. Neo was dismissive of them, while the twins thought of her as a bitter rival. Miltia told me the story one night when she had a bit too much to drink. Apparently, they'd all attended some shady school for assassins that doubled as a finishing school for girls. Back then, Neo, being a few years younger, got bullied for being mute by the twins. It was a bit hard to imagine the flirtatious, visually bombastic woman being shy, but she'd been quite the wallflower. Imagine their surprise when the same girl quickly overshadowed them under the partnership of Roman Torchwick. Now, Miltia admitted, with much gnashing of teeth, that the ice cream-themed girl was much stronger than they were. Ever since Neo found out I could make ice cream, she became a regular sight at the bar. Anytime anyone gave me shit for being a faneuse, she made her displeasure known with a swift kick to the dick, probably harsher than I'd ever be for a mortal with too much lip. It was by far the fastest way to end your night at this club and wake up in the dumpster tomorrow. I suspected her presence was a big part of what drove the twins to take my training sessions seriously. Now, with me in the center, they'd struck up an uneasy alliance. Melanie glanced at her rival with a cautious glare. Truce. In the name of ice cream. Neo nodded seriously before slapping Roman upside the head for good measure. A dainty handshake sealed the deal. I get no respect around here, the master thief complained. One of these days, I'd have to introduce him to Alec. The two could compete to see who annoyed the other more. To be honest, I considered the fact that this was the kingpin of Vale to be a good sign of the effectiveness of the local law enforcement. Were I in their place, I too would leave the relatively harmless man in power. More than anything, there seemed to be a gentleman's agreement between the criminal and lawful elements of the city. With the grim being attracted to negative emotions, the criminals tried to keep things relatively bloodless for the most part and, in many cases, policed their own who went too far. Or, at the very least, they kept things out of the public eye. Deeds, not words, Roman, I chided. If you want respect, you earn it. With raspberry cheesecake ice cream and drizzled honey. Damn straight, the twins chorused, grabbing their bowls with relish. Neos only remained on the counter because she'd already taken it and replaced it with an illusion, all the better to bait out and punish would-be ice cream thieves. Our peace was disturbed when, with the flow of petals, Ruby Rose settled into an empty bar stool. She dumped my ingot of lunar cold iron onto the table with a pouty huff. Here. I blinked in confusion. What? You don't like it? Do you have any idea how much this costs? Well. Didn't you say you wanted something more durable so you could increase the caliber? I did. And? She looked down with a heated blush and mumbled, too quiet for most to hear, I couldn't melt it. I snorted in laughter. It made sense in hindsight. Lunar cold iron was a highly, magically durable metal. It was so impressive that the four heavenly beasts used it as the primary metal in the alloy that made up their weapons. Chang'e made her satellites out of it when she took to copying the Chinese space program for funsies. In other words, it was a metal that would not be found lacking when compared to some of the most magically powerful objects in the netherworld. If this ingot appeared in a mortal auction in my old world, magical families would beggar themselves to have it. But by the same token, such heavenly durability meant it was impossible to forge through mundane means. It wasn't just heat that was the issue. It was the lack of mana to synchronize and mold the metal into its liquid form, mana that no one on Remnant knew how to properly manipulate. Forging it would have been a challenge for the greatest smiths in my world, those who worked directly under Luo Hao, Annie, and the like. Being able to present a weapon made of this metal would enshrine that mortal smith as among the best in his generation, a proof of mastery not dissimilar to the WGO's triple platinum stars for chefs. Here, where knowledge of magic had faded into myth. I may as well have asked RWBY to mold a black hole into a hat. Wow! I really need to spend more time with mortals. I muttered under my breath. How could I have forgotten something so obvious? All right, are there any forges nearby we can borrow? I can forge it if you give me the appropriate design. You can. Of course I can. Milty sighed, her spoon paused halfway to her dainty lips. Let me get this straight, Bun Bun. You have a metal that a professional forge at a huntsman prep school can't melt. Yes. And you can just melt it whenever you want. Yup. She sent her sister a long-suffering look. One more for Tianyu's. Sounds like it, Melanie said, shrugging ambivalently. Just deal, sis. Tianyu doesn't make sense. I don't know what I was expecting. Where did you get something like this anyway? The moon, I spoke honestly. Behu likes to dig them up once in a while. Fine, it's a secret. I get it. I wasn't lying though. Sure, Bun Bun. I rolled my eyes. One of these days, I'd have to take them to the lunar palace proper. They'd love Laura. They can commiserate over having the privilege of being my students. Or my first student would take out her repressed trauma on them and make them peel potatoes for a week straight. Either way, it promised to be amusing. Roman stared curiously at the ingot. So, a metal even huntsman-grade smiths can't touch? How much would this be worth, do you think? Neo's lifetime ice cream privileges, I deadpanned. Neo, he touches that, shove your umbrella up his ass, won't you? The dessert-themed girl nodded so fast her head looked like a blur. Or she used her semblance. Either way, Roman decided to find other marks. Che, it's worthless if I can't make anything out of it anyway. RWBY tapped the ingot. So, you'll help me make my baby? Sure, RWBY, I said, ruffling her hair. She batted at my hand in indignation. Take me to a forge tomorrow evening. I can leave the kitchen to Jeremy. Okay. You promised, baby killer. You know, the way you talk, this'll mean we're making a baby together, I teased. Her face burned an atomic red as the bar devolved into giggles. That's a lie. What? That you want to be my baby mama? No. Yes. No. Yes. She ran out of the club in a burst of rose petals. Well, that's one way to get rid of the goody two-shoes, Melanie said. She leaned back, her bowl empty and tummy satisfied. That was great, Bun Bun. You're very welcome, Mel, I nodded, always happy to hear from a full customer. Roman tossed a plastic card on the table. Black, with a magnetic strip along one side. I nodded and slid it into the register. Whatever else could be said about the asshat, he was also the type to grossly overpay for the sake of appearances. I don't know how you can stomach that stuff. Way too sweet, not like a dignified Negroni, he huffed. Come on, Neo, we've got work to do, heists to plan. Come again, you two, I called. Maybe it was my century of having to be related to Alec, but the master thief didn't get on my nerves nearly as much as I'd expected. I could appreciate a man who appreciated a great cocktail. X. That was how I found myself awaiting one Ruby Rose outside an address she sent me. Malcolm Smithy was a shop catered towards huntsmen, one of the best in the city according to Junior. He was also a contact of one Taeyang Xiaolong, father of the idiot siblings. Ruby apparently got him to loan us his forge for the evening after standard business hours. Let's make a baby. Ruby cried as she arrived in a torrent of rose petals. I reached out and snatched her out of the air, gripping her cheeks with one hand until she hung in the air by her face. No. We are not making a baby. We are making a weapon. Stop trying to get me registered as a pedophile, you insolent brat. Cushion woes ishma baby, she moaned through squished cheeks. I let her flail around for a while longer before dropping her. Come on, ya little menace. We strolled inside to find Malcolm waiting for us. If I didn't know any better, I'd have thought he was one of Dvalin's brood. The man was a dead ringer for a dwarf in every way. He was a good 4 inches shorter than me, with arms as thick as my head and a long, shaggy beard laden with soot. He also had the least impressed look on his face I'd seen in a long time. So you're Ty's brat, he muttered gruffly. How the hell did you break your weapon in 4 months? I didn't. Ruby cried. She pointed to me like I was the source of all the world's evils. He's the one who murdered Crescent Rose. I rolled my eyes. And I'm making you a new scythe. Now come on, brat. Malcolm, right? Thank you for lending us your forge for the evening. You know, it takes longer than an evening to forge a mecha shift weapon. You'll be here tomorrow too, I reckon. You two are just lucky I owe Ty a few favors. It won't take long. I just need the plans from Ruby. Humph, I'll be watching to make sure you two don't blow up my forge. Hey, I made Crescent Rose on my own, Ruby protested. I learned from Dvalin and Odin. I'll be fine, I added. I'll be the judge of that. Come on, Malcolm said gruffly. He took us into a side room, past a storage area with various ingots of steel, coal, and quenching oil. I nodded with approval. The man kept a clean smithy, a challenge in itself considering the profession. He seemed like a man dedicated to his craft, someone I could respect. He began putting fuel into the fire and handed me a hammer. Well, lad. Show me what you can do. I nodded and removed the lunar cold iron from my pocket. I took the plans from Ruby and looked them over. All told, Crescent Rose Mk2 looked remarkably like the original. It had a 3-section fold-out blade, 2 claws on the opposite side of the head that I assumed doubled as sights when using her rifle, and a shaft that doubled as a sniper rifle, scope, and all. She'd outlined on one page all the differences this model would have compared to the first. To start, the shaft was a little bit thicker to accommodate a higher caliber. The magazine was also a little bit longer as a consequence. There was also a secondary magazine that was smaller than the first and housed only 4 rounds. A toggle mechanism had been added next to the trigger so she could switch between her regular fare and specialized bullets, which she described as boom babies. I stared at the design and took a deep breath. The more I saw of her weapon, the more ridiculous it seemed. I had to try. Ruby. I know you love your weapon, but have you considered making more adjustments? I asked gently. She stared at me suspiciously. Like what? My baby needs to be a rifle, my entire fighting style is based on it. Right, you use its recoil to augment your semblance. Okay, show me how you fire your weapon. There are two ways actually, she chirped happily. She pointed to a diagram of crescent rows in which the shaft was partially extended while the blade remained folded inward. I can fire her like this and use the scope like a normal rifle. Or, I can unfold my baby all the way and plant her into the ground. So, if the shaft is as long as you are, and the butt is blade so you can't brace it against your shoulder, how do you use the rifle scope when your weapon's unfolded all the way? Do you just kneel awkwardly, sling the shaft under your arm, and lean into the shaft to peek through the scope? Well, I don't. Okay, let's try this again. How far is the longest distance you've successfully shot at? I don't really know. From your fighting style, less than 100 yards, right? You're pretty fast, but you still need to be relatively close if you want to back up your squad as a huntress, yes. Yeah? But the scope looks so cool, she pouted. Had to admit, it was kinda cute, in a child who didn't want to give up her stuffed animals sorta way. You get my point, right? The scope is only useful sometimes, and most huntsman combat isn't going to require it. I think you should make it a detachable module instead of something folded into your rifle. You can carry it in a pouch next to your spare magazines and clip it on when you need it. What if I need it really quickly? It shouldn't take you more than 3 seconds to clip on a scope if we make the attachments right. And if you, someone with the speed semblance, can't spare 3 seconds, that's not the time for a scope. Fianny. I nodded happily. I was a little surprised I'd gotten through to her on even something like this. Don't worry, it's not like Crescent Rose is losing any functionality. If anything, it's better this way since you can block with the shaft and swing it around like a melee weapon without potentially damaging the scope's glass. Okay, what else? Is there any way to not have the magazine get in the way when you fight? Like, don't you sometimes slide your hand along the shaft and catch your finger against it on accident? I used to when Uncle Crow first started training me, she admitted, but I like it. I want everyone to be able to tell that my baby is also a gun. Seeing that I wouldn't get anywhere on that front, I decided to let her have the impractical weapon. Truly, a design like this could only have come from someone like RWBY. Scythes, like axes, tended to have handles that sloped gently to be more ergonomic, so as to minimize the jarring recoil from striking something with a lot of force. Unfortunately, a rifle barrel obviously couldn't be sloped. It wasn't the worst thing in the world, but it suggested to me that RWBY was more interested in the rule of cool than having a perfectly optimal weapon. If I presented something like this to Dvalin, he'd skin me alive. Fine, magazine, grip, and all the other basics of a rifle need to stay. But why is the sight a claw? And why is it facing towards you? If you ever need to hit something with a backswing, wouldn't having something that sticks straighter up like the claw of a hammer be better? True. It does get a bit hard to aim through. Okay, how about this? She scribbled something into the blueprint until the blades of the claw were angled the same as the main scythe. This way, if I swing backwards, my baby can follow the same arc. That sounds fine. Are we good to start forging now? Why yet? Can you really make all this in one evening? I nodded. I flared the Wuxing seal, mostly for show, and let the character for fire glow hot. I then stuck my hand into the forge that Malcolm prepared, ignoring their gasp of surprise. Relax. I've done this before. Inside the furnace, so the room wouldn't get too unbearably hot for my spectators, I channeled more chi into the flame until the fire started to glow a worrying white. Taking the lunar cold iron, I began to stretch it like taffy. The ingot was already pure, so there was no need to fold it to remove impurities, but I did it a few times anyway so I could feed mana into it and make it more malleable. I removed the glowing ingot but did not place it onto the anvil. I couldn't, or the cast iron would deform from the heat. Instead, I held it in my hands and began to knead it like pastry dough. Dvalin used to make fun of me, saying a chef would always be a chef, even in the forge. He wasn't wrong. Piece by piece, I molded it all into shape. It was as much my mana as my memory and artisanship. The magic remembered what I wanted. I was the moon, and so was this lunar cold iron. As the jade rabbit, my will was its reality. Occasionally, I'd take a finished piece and drop the heat rapidly, effectively doing the same thing as if I'd quenched it in oil manually. The most challenging part of it all was fitting the glass lenses into the new scope. I was cheating. Dvalin would probably smack me with his hammer and tell me to try this bullshit on something that wasn't of the moon. Everything I just did was an insult to smiths everywhere who'd spent their entire lifetime mastering their craft, but that was fine. I never claimed to be a master smith, merely a hobbyist. A single hour later, I presented RWBY with her new weapon. Here you are, Crescent Rose Mk2. Don't worry, it's cooled already. Malcolm stared at me as if he'd seen a ghost. Or Dvalin himself. What? How in brother's name did you? Don't stress, Malcolm. Seriously, just think of me as a freak of nature and move on. That was so cool. RWBY squealed. She grabbed her new weapon, still an unpainted silvery gray, and tested out its mecha shift functions. Where did you learn to do that? I told you, I cook for people and they sometimes offer me something other than money to pay their tabs. One of them happens to be a very good smith. That wasn't smithing, boy, Malcolm grumbled. I don't know what that was, but that wasn't smithing. I know. It drives Dvalin insane too, says I'm a disgrace to smiths everywhere. It's fine, I'm a chef. Fucker likes to cook steak on a toasty anvil just to piss me off too, so we're even. In the end, the two of us left a still flabbergasted Malcolm after I forged a few magazines for RWBY. The little reaper skipped happily along as she hummed to herself, Crescent Rose swinging through the air. I reached out and caught the blade between two fingers. Put it away, RWBY. Don't swing it while walking down the sidewalk, you look like a serial killer. She pouted but folded it up and slotted it in a holster at the small of her back. Fine. So. Are you going to go home now? I suppose I could. It's only 9 now, but I did give Jeremy the kitchen tonight. Why? Did you have somewhere else you wanted to be? We need to paint my baby. And I could use more dust rounds. Oh, and how does engraving work? Didn't you say you didn't want your baby to get tattoos? I teased. That was before you proved you knew what you were talking about. This brat. So. Fine, but we need some dust. Let's go get that first since you can paint without me. Okay, come on. I know a place that opens late. She regaled me with different combinations of dust enchantments she'd want. In the end, we settled for gravity to make her weapon heavier or lighter, and win to give her a decent array of options at all ranges. Homeless Bunny 11. Ruby dragged me out to a place called From Dusk Till Dawn, a quaint little store that sold dust to huntsmen in various grades. The store had 2 large windows that gave passers-by a good look at its wares and a near selection that ranged from self-serve powder dispensaries that charged by the weight in one wall to fist-sized dust crystals behind glass exhibits that doubled as the counter. Some of the dust was also pre-shaped into specific cartridge sizes for easy use. Most of all, what struck me was the mana. I could feel it flow through the store, the presence of magic sealed in each crystal grain calling to me. It was at once chaotic and beautiful, each element playing a different song to my sensitive ears. I felt Ruby take me by the hand and bodily drag me into the store. "Come on, Tianyu. Let's get our baby some ink." I rolled my eyes and tried to suppress a smile. The kid was too cute, honestly. You realize how stupid that sounds, right? Whatever. Crescent Rose needs dust. Oh. And they have gravity. And wind. They do indeed. Question is, do you have money? Yes. Enough for 2 high-end crystals? Because higher purity will naturally make for a better product. She glanced at the exhibit and visibly winced. Oh. Does it have to be top-grade dust? I chuckled and handed the shopkeeper my card. It's fine. You owe me money, got it? I can't. Didn't you want the best for your baby? Our baby. We made her together. Still creepy. And seriously, it's fine. I refuse to engrave your silly sniper scythe with anything less than the best of the best, I said, explaining the context so the shopkeeper would stop staring at us like we were teen parents. Are you sure? I'll pay you back. Sure, whatever you say, kid. It really didn't matter. Junior did pay me after all. I wasn't raking in millions or anything, but considering I lived at the club and all my standard of living concerns were provided for, I didn't mind. If anything, I had a lot more lean than I knew what to do with. Moreover, the newly reforged Crescent Rose Mk2 was worth incomparably more than anything else in this world. I could quite literally give her a New York skyscraper, and that kind of cash would still be considered the cherry on top compared to a weapon of lunar cold iron. Ask a mage from Earth, and they'd consider Ruby among the wealthiest people on the planet simply for having that weapon. I nodded gratefully to the shopkeeper, an elderly, balding man with gray hair who faintly smelled of ramen, and stashed my 2 dust crystals. I was ready to head home, but Ruby pulled me aside to a magazine rack. Oh. Tianyu, look. The latest edition of Lock and Load came out. Ruby, I have no idea what that is. It's the best magazine for guns. You should check it out, she exclaimed excitably. I don't have a gun, so I don't care about the magazine, I said patiently. I then spied something else. Now, Cuisine Connoisseur sounds like a magazine I'd be interested in. Do you think about anything other than cooking? Do you think about anything other than guns? Of course not, they're super important for a huntress. Actually, you should get a gun. Ruby, I'm faster than your sniper rifle. Even I'm not that fast. I sighed and remembered that I didn't actually do any moving while Ruby watched. She tried to hit me with her scythe, and I just kind of slapped her around for a bit, didn't take a step. Ruby, if you were to fire your bullet at the street light outside, I'd be able to run outside, catch the bullet, and put it back in your hand before the bullet could crack the glass. Ha, yeah, right. You're strong, but no one's that fast. Sure, whatever. We let the conversation die as we went about reading our respective magazines. Ruby pulled out a set of headphones, emblazoned with her personal crest, and started listening to some rock pop thing I vaguely remembered hearing on the radio. I was happy with how the evening turned out. Jeremy got his kitchen. I got to clear my debt. Ruby got a kick-ass weapon. Everyone won tonight. I must have spoken too soon because I heard a familiar pompous ass step onto the street. Civilians cleared the way as quickly as they were able, though how they could take Roman Torquick of all people seriously, I had no clue. Maybe I really was losing touch with the common man. Was Torchwick supposed to be scary to normies? What really got my attention were the half-dozen Seong family grunts following behind him. They swaggered down the street like they expected rent money from all involved, which now that I thought about it, might be true. The men made a beeline towards the store, passing several other stores that were closed for the night, and thus would be easier marks if they were out for cash. That made their objective clear: dust. What Roman wanted with this didn't interest me as much as why Junior agreed to lend him men. At least the twins aren't involved in this shit, I thought. If they were, I'd have to provide them with more guidance than usual. I could have led Ruby out of the store, made things easy for them, but upon reflection, I decided to pull a bit of a prank on the gang members. And sometimes, doing nothing was the prank. Do you have any idea how hard it is to find a dust shop open this late? I heard Roman's voice behind me. Next to him, one of Seong's grunts pulled a gun on the shopkeeper. I made a note to discipline him later. I waited, and sure enough, one of the mooks came our way. Ruby heard nothing, distracted with the latest silencer model from Atlas. Put your hands where I can see them, the mook called. Slowly, I folded my magazine and turned around with a beatific smile on my face. My ears fell, lying flat against my scalp in a sign no one could misinterpret. Are you robbing me? I cackled inside as the poor man went deathly pale. He may or may not have pissed himself a little. I know. I coughed insistently. If they wanted to rob a joint, I expected them to show a little commitment, damn it. Besides, I figured if I fought off a gang, no matter how incompetent they were, I could clear my name. I couldn't possibly be White Fang then, right? Just a humble chef doing his civic duty. My eyes narrowed in unspoken threat. I could quite literally hear the cold sweat trickle down his back. I said, "Are you robbing me?" "Yes." "Are you asking me or telling me?" "Telling you." He coughed awkwardly, red machete swinging around like a balloon animal. "Telling you." I nudged Ruby with my foot. She turned around, saw the suited man with a machete, and looked at me with betrayal. I rolled my eyes. Just because I lived at the club didn't mean I had anything to do with these idiots. Slowly, in the most pained deadpan I could manage, I said, a helpless, adorably fluffy, and unimaginably talented chef, is being robbed at knife point by a vicious gangster. Won't a brave, vertically challenged huntress save the day?" Ruby blinked. She looked around the shop, saw Roman rifle through more dust, and finally connected the dots. "Oh. Yeah." Ruby launched the poor mook out the window with a spinning drop kick. The girl had a surprising amount of power in her lithe frame, maybe from swinging around a sniper scythe. She leapt after him, pulling crescent rows from her back with the hiss of mecha shift joints. It unfolded in gleaming silver that caught the shattered moonlight above. The lunar cold iron seemed to react to the moonlight, casting an eerie aura of power around the young woman. Roman and the rest of the grunts turned at the noise. I held out my palms in surrender. "Hit me and you can find someone else to make your cocktails," I snarked. Roman took one look at me and dismissed me as a non-factor. He gestured to the men on loan. "Okay. Get her." It was a short fight. They swung their machetes like idiots, with zero thought to form or technique or even basic common sense. I found one trying to wield it in a reverse grip like a praying mantis, only for RWBY to promptly feed him his teeth with a backswing that shattered his aura. Honestly, I was a little ashamed to be associated with these guys. I wasn't part of the gang or anything, but the fact that RWBY thought I was involved in this stupidity stung a little. Had I known I'd be lumped in with them, I might have even taught them a thing or two so they wouldn't be so fucking embarrassing to watch. "You were worth every cent, truly you were," Roman grumbled under his breath as the last of them was knocked out cold and flung at his feet. That was a relief to hear. It meant Junior loaned him a few men for money, not for a partnership or anything. Mercenary work wasn't the cleanest occupation out there, but I could respect the hustle. I'd have to talk to him about taking jobs from more reputable sources, however. Roman held out his cane like a gun and depressed a button on one side. The bottom opened up and stood straight, becoming a sight he could aim through. Then, with the press of a trigger, an explosive round of some sort was launched from the cane. Because of course the fucking cane was also a gun. I didn't bother moving even now. RWBY was plenty fast enough to dodge such a slow-moving round. And sure enough, the little Reaper leapt through the air, needlessly pirouetting like a ballerina. At least her cape made it look kinda neat. Roman was already halfway up a fire escape. RWBY caught up with a single bullet from Crescent Rose, using it and her semblance like a demented pogo stick to boost herself up several stories. Roman said some quippy one-liner, blew up some dust, and a blonde librarian who either really liked horseback riding or had some suggestive interests showed up. Roman got into an aircraft and was about to flee, leaving Seong's men lying around the torn-up street. Seeing how they'd both forgotten about me, I was about to head back home when I felt it, Mana. It wasn't RWBY, it felt too different from her petrifying gaze thing to be her power going nuts again. It felt like fire, but with different elements swirling just beneath the surface. This world was still very new to me, but after weeks of study, I could at least consider myself well versed on local legends, and elemental magics of this caliber were associated with just one legend I knew of, the Maidens. I blurred onto the rooftop. "Tianyu!" RWBY cried in surprise. "Stand back. This is no place for students," the blonde yelled. A purple seal of some kind glowed in the air, not unlike my own. I felt her aura sink into the molten debris around her, shaping it into a lance she launched at the aircraft. The magic came from the pretty woman in red. Beneath the shadow of the darkened aircraft, I could see a woman with long, wavy, raven locks and eyes of liquid gold. She had a confident smirk on her face and wore clothes embroidered with dust. She brought her hands together and a burst of flame exploded out from her. The blast scattered the librarian's lance while leaving the debris unharmed. I promptly ignored the librarian as she squawked out a warning behind me. Skipping into the air, I landed inside the aircraft. "What's up, Doc?" I asked with a cheeky grin. "How the hell did you get here?" "Not important." "You, Fire Lady, what's with the magic?" The woman in red didn't reply. Instead, she shot me with a concentrated blast of flame that would have launched me clean out of the aircraft had not the mana simply fizzled out as it touched me. Rude. Seriously, are you a maiden? Who are you? I'm a chef. And I've been looking for the maidens. Do you mind if we have a little chat? Another burst of flame washed over me, doing fuck all. Her eyes widened in surprise and a little worry now. Seeing how magic wasn't cutting it, she closed with me in melee, launching a high kick towards my face. I let it connect. She was good. Not Yinghua good, but good enough that I'd seriously consider introducing her to the holy cult of 5 mountains as a junior acolyte were we on Earth. Still, Luo Hao hit me harder than this when we were messing around. Nonplussed, I continued to ask her questions conversationally. Really, I just want to chat. Do you know who gave you your powers? The legends say a great wizard blessed 4 girls, but who's the wizard? Is he dead? If so, where is his grave? Are you the original maiden or is there some kind of inheritance ritual I should know about? Get us out of here, the woman spat at Roman. She then drew a pair of knives made of obsidian glass. No, there was some dust-based chemical there too, probably why it could change shape. She lunged towards me, immediately going for the throat. I didn't want to ruin my clothes. Shopping was a pain when people were dicks to Fanus, and giving the twins carte blanche to use me as a dress-up doll sounded awful, so I tanked the attacks with my face. Look, if I let you keep stabbing me, can you please answer my questions? I asked placatingly. You're fucking with me, Roman groaned. What the hell are you, kid? A chef. Cinder, we're clear. You know this Fanus, the woman called Cinder growled. Xiong family's new chef. Really good cook. I gasped, affronted. Excuse me? I'm the best chef. For the love of. Why are you here? Didn't you hear me? I'm just here to ask her about the maidens. What maidens? You know, the legend about a wizard giving magic to 4 girls. I'm still trying to figure out the rest, but I'm like 90% sure your friend's one of them. You can't live, Cinder whispered. I'm sorry, Roman, it seems you now know too much. I didn't expect our partnership to end so soon, but needs must. I rolled my eyes. Seriously? What is it with you and all this melodrama? I come to ask some questions and you try to murder me. I tell him a neat little legend and you want to murder him too. Anyone ever told you that you can't solve your problems with violence? I paused. Unless you're Doni. Or Vauban. Or Luo Hao. Okay, maybe you can, but you're nowhere near strong enough to do that. She snarled and lashed out in a blur of strikes that I stopped with my trusty spoon. What are you? I told you already. A chef. Now answer my questions, woman. I have nothing to say to you. She let out a shout of exertion and I felt her mana spike. A ball of fire condensed in her hand with enough magic to blow up a city block. I frowned. Her legs tensed and I knew she'd try to dive down in the blast, using it as a smoke screen to flee. I couldn't have that. I didn't want to make too much of a scene, so I reached out and plucked it from her hand before stuffing the fireball in my mouth. It tingled a bit going down, but I wasn't terribly worried about potentially bypassing my protections. Even if it was strong enough, the Reaper of Harvest's authority would protect me from anything I willingly consumed, converting it all into mana for my use. You ate it? Yeah? So. I yelled back. What the hell are you? Cinder screamed, panicked. Instead of answering, I lashed out with a punch that knocked her out cold. She clearly wasn't in the right headspace to talk. I wrapped an arm around her waist as she slumped to the floor. Turning, I looked back at Roman with a glower. If I turn you in, Neo's going to break you out within the day, isn't she? I asked. It wasn't lost on me that the midget wasn't around. She'd hear about his arrest within a few hours and bust him out on her own, and that was if she didn't need to buy the location of his holding cell from Junior first. I'm not sure what the right answer here is. Buddy old pal. You called me an animal and told me not to shed in your drink. Last night. Ah ha 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 ha. What's a little ribbing between friends, eh? I don't know, that was very hurtful, you know. It's not like I shed any more than a normal person. Ah ha ha ha. I blame the alcohol. Turn this plane around. You're alive because you can appreciate a good cocktail. Huh, I'm never going to that AA meeting, he mumbled. Despite his bitching, the airship reversed course and I soon found myself landing back on the rooftop, the one called Cinder slung over my shoulder. Roman followed after me. He turned and eyed the controls contemplatively, but a glare from me kept him trudging along. Yo, Ruby, I greeted. "Tianyu. How? What happened?" I jostled the woman on my shoulder. She's like you. She's got magic powers, but with elements instead of magic eyes. I'm pretty sure she's a maiden. Oh, and Roman's turning himself in. We had a heartfelt chat and everything. The librarian stiffened. How did you know that? Who are you? Why does everyone keep asking me that? I'm a chef. Is this a joke to you? And here we go again. Look, I'm going to insist I'm a chef. You're not going to believe me. Can we skip this song and dance and get around to answering my questions for a change? She squawked something incoherently. Her face turned an interesting shade of red before she sighed and said something about me being Ajban's problem. Okay, fine. I can arrange for answers. If you would come with us. Thank you, that's literally all I want from you. Sure as hell isn't an S&M sesh. And if you would relinquish the criminals into my custody. I shrugged. She clearly knew what a maiden was, I could probably trust her to hang on to Cinder. I also felt confident in my ability to find her later now that I knew what Cinder's magic felt like. Fine, go ahead.